Welcome to this special episode of the Poltergeist Project podcast. I'm historian Stephen Miller, and back when I started this podcast, I became aware that Cambridge University held the archive for the Society for Psychical Research. Now, the SPR was formed in 1882 and was the first scientific organisation in the world which was set up specifically to investigate claims of paranormal phenomena. Given its age, it's not surprising. The archive is vast, covers nearly 150 years of paranormal history and includes some very famous cases such as Enfield and Battersea. What I was interested in was a collection they have of poltergeist case files. So I did a long trawl through the online catalogue to identify cases that I thought had potential and that fit my specific remit for this podcast. So that will be cases from the UK and only cases that are over 100 years old. I could see in the catalogue that they had a file on Gwen Morley and the Keighley case from Series 1, as well as a file on the current series of Poltergeist Project on Wyke. So they were obviously of great interest. I also identified 8 other potential cases. So grab a coffee as I go through exactly what I found in the UK Poltergeist X-Files. So I got in touch with the Special Collections team a couple of months ago now at the University Library, and I made arrangements to view the files that I identified. I went there just a few days ago to actually do the research. I live quite a long way away from Cambridge, unfortunately. So I had the 4+ hour train journey, including a couple of rail replacement buses, always fun, down to Cambridge on what was a very hot weekend here in the UK. I booked myself a room at the Travelodge, 3 stars. So in the morning I got up, ate far too much of the breakfast buffet, and then took the scenic walk along the River Cam around the city centre to the University Library. The staff were absolutely lovely, from the front desk to the specialists in the reading room. They explained everything I needed to know, lockers and all that fun. Having worked in archives before, I knew I wouldn't be able to take much with me into the reading room. No pens, no bags, no food or drink. Really, just my laptop, phone and a notepad and pencil. Thankfully, they have no restrictions on photography for research purposes. That can be different at different archives. I've worked in archives where we've charged for like a day pass for people to take photos, but thankfully there was none of that at Cambridge, so that was great. Meant I could, skim read the documents, but I didn't have to manually write them all out and transcribe them there and then, which saved me a lot of time. So I took photographs of all the pages and I can transcribe them at my leisure at home. I picked up my first file from the counter and found myself a table. As is standard in archives, I was only allowed 1 file at a time, but it was very exciting. I had no idea what would be in the files, really. I was actually a little bit worried. I'd gone all the way to Cambridge and it was just going to be a load of newspaper cuttings, that people had sent into the SPR and they'd just collected over the years, or maybe it'd just be really basic information. So that was my concern. The first file came, it's a A4 hardbacked brown envelope with item number from the catalogue, the location of the incident, which in this case was Essex, the year, and some details about the people involved in terms of the people involved in the haunting and the people at the SPR who had investigated or made the SPR aware of it. I opened up the envelope and inside was a 130-year-old marble paperback notebook. I reached for a book cushion at that point. I could see that the spine of the notebook was already fragile. Looked like it probably hadn't been opened in the 130 years it had been in storage. So I rested it on a book cushion and started to look inside. Inside the notebook was a handwritten report by SPR investigator Colonel Taylor. Now that's a name I've come across in my research already, but he hasn't yet featured in a series. But he will do. The notebook included 25 pages of witness statements all about this single case. And in amongst the notes were some really very well drawn illustrations as well, which was interesting. Then tucked right in the back of the notebook, there were some letters. the correspondence between Colonel Taylor and a Miss Clifton, who was a local SPR member who had first identified the case and passed it on to the main SPR office in London. Miss Clifton herself had also taken a further witness statement and included that in her letters. I'm not going to go into the details of the case now. I will save that for another series. But in terms of my expectations for the day, it was a great start to get some primary, handwritten source material that had never been seen before. I wasn't just dealing with secondary stuff that other people might have already researched or dismissed. So that was a very positive start for my day. So I took my notes, I photographed the pages, and then I returned the file to the desk, and the nice lady on the desk passed me my next one. I'm not going to go through all of them here. They were a little bit hit and miss. Some of the SPR investigators from the time had pretty much dismissed the cases, or they had done an investigation and they'd found foul play, human elements to it, nothing extraordinary. But there were some really interesting stories. And what I was looking for were ones that obviously hadn't been explained at the time. Of the 8 that I viewed, I have selected 4 that I think have got potential as series for this podcast, including the one I've just mentioned. The next one of the 4 would be, it's a case from Hampstead in London. It involved an internationally renowned artist with close links to the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. And this report was a typed one, which is always nice, just for the handwriting. This was a typed report by SPR member Margaret Wallace. And then there was another London case. This one was from New Cross in southeast London, which is actually close to where I lived for a time. This included a report by an SPR research officer called Eric Dingwall. Brilliant name. Also, a curious and frankly ridiculous character. His nickname was Dirty Ding. Google him. I'm sure he'll turn up when I get into this series. But the report was about a kind of ridiculous story, really, involving a musician. And I think the most capable poltergeist I've ever heard of. Capable is an odd word, but this entity could read and write. It would have full-blown conversations with the people in the house. It could play the piano, including the keys, pedals, and even turn the pages of the music itself. So the file contained a report by Dingwall, some letters, and even a small piece of string that has allegedly had been cut by the poltergeist, which was a bit of a surprise. But it does mean I got to handle something allegedly moved by a poltergeist, which is quite exciting. Honestly, as a skeptic, this one actually is, I'm not quite sure about it. It is such a good story, I might do it as a one-off special or something. It probably doesn't warrant a full series. My skeptical alarm bells are ringing when someone, is writing about a poltergeist. Fully fledged, playing the piano, reading music, turning pages. It sounds a bit much. But anyway, I will get into it and see whether it's one worthy of a series in the future. And then the 4th one, which I think is going to be the one that will be my next series. So after Wyke, which I'll come on to. This is a case from rural Oxfordshire, and it's by far the darkest poltergeist case I'll have covered. It's genuinely quite disturbing and scary. It's got some pretty tragic features to it as well that I will have to treat carefully as a historian. But it is also a fascinating case and totally unexplained at the time. It links closely to the First World War, which is something I've not really touched on in any of the series so far, but for a long time was a particular specialism of mine as a historian. It also, weirdly, has a connection to the creator of James Bond, Ian Fleming. Yeah, it's an interesting but at times unpleasant case, but I'd really like to get to the bottom of and see what exactly might have been going on. So yeah, there are the 4 potentials. The others, as I said, I was able to dismiss because the SPR had dismissed them at the time. They're a mixture, I suppose. Weird, scary, at times some quite funny. Importantly, I think, and this is different to all the series I've done so far, they were all kept very private at the time. I don't think any of them will have appeared in the press. In fact, to be honest, I don't think anyone has looked at any of these files since they were filed away by the SPR over 100 years ago. So that's, as a historian, a really exciting prospect. So what about Keighley and Wyke? Well, the Wyke file was, I'm afraid, the smallest of all the files that I was handed. It included a newspaper cutting about the case, which I've already read, and then 2 letters from John Arthur Hill, a local SPR member, parapsychologist, and expert on spiritualism. If you've listened to, he features actually in the Keighley series, and he was in the first episode of the Wyke series as well. I'll cover the contents of the letters in the next episode of the Wyke Poltergeist. There's some interesting points, but unfortunately, no revelations. As discussed in the first episode, the phenomena didn't last very long at Wyke, so he didn't have a chance to get out there and investigate himself, but he did make some inquiries and he knew some local people who had investigated and spoken to the family, so he does have some insights into the story that aren't available anywhere else. Finally, Keighley. Now, it just so happened, so I was sat there for most of the day going through these files. I was kind of waiting for the Keighley one, but it was the last file they gave me to view. It was also by far the biggest file, a really thick folder, not an envelope. Now, I know this case so well now. It was the first series. I've spoken about it since. I've given talks on it. I've spoken with the family. I'm really kind of into the background of this story. So it was really exciting to get some new content on it. And there were some things in there that have never been made public in the newspapers or via James Hewitt Mackenzie's report into the haunted mill girl. I'm going to do a full episode on this, a special case update. But for now, I can reveal that the file included the original letter and report that mill manager Mr. Bell sent to Sirs Arthur Conan Doyle and Oliver Lodge. I didn't know Oliver Lodge was involved at such an early stage. The report clears up some of the very early history of Gwen's experiences before she went to the British College of Psychic Science. This is great as it's direct from the horse's mouth. It's not second-hand or edited by the press. And there's then a series of backwards and forwards letters between John Arthur Hill again. Old Dirty Ding was involved. He was at the SPR offices in London. And then we have input from Oliver Lodge and Eleanor Sidgwick. Now, to say the least, these letters are pretty tetchy. The SPR top brass were not happy that they didn't get to do the main investigation of this case. They clearly saw it as a hugely significant one. John Arthur Hill wrote in one of his letters, "I have little doubt that the girl possesses physical phenomena powers, and indeed I am disposed to think that she might make one of the most remarkable mediums we have ever had." So, the next episode I release will be the Keighley update. I'll then move on to the second episode of the Wyke Poltergeist. Apologies for the delay with this, but as you've just heard, I've been quite busy, but I will get there. There's also going to be my collaboration coming out soon with the Beyond the Veil podcast, which they're releasing on the 2nd of August. There's a trailer out now on their social media and YouTube, if you want to check that out. I then have 4 potential new series cases to add to my growing list of potential series. Safe to say, there's still an awful lot to be uncovered. Thanks as always for listening. I just wanted to share some of these initial thoughts I'd had about my trip and how it will feed into future series. I also, to be honest, wanted to give an idea of the process. Accessing the archive, or any UK archive really, is usually totally free. Anyone can do it, but I know it's sometimes perhaps a bit daunting if you've not been in that world or done it previously. Hopefully, through this you might be inspired to have a dig around in your own local archive or local history collections. Maybe even book yourself a visit to see the wonderful SPR collection at Cambridge. I only skimmed the surface on this visit. There is so much more to that collection. Maybe I will have future trips down there as well if there are other items that I think might be of interest. But for now, that'll be a goodbye from me.